So I thought I'd make a quick video going over how I build my guitar chains, completely digital, with almost all free stuff. The only thing I'm using that's paid is my impulse responses from OwnHammer, and you could find stuff that's equally as good if you look up God's Cab on Google. You could find a whole bunch of free impulses. Anyways, let's jump into it. So the first thing you will always find in every single one of my chains is noise suppression. This is a free plugin from Vadim Taranov. Absolutely love it. If you have a grounding issue or if you have any noise from your interface, you'll probably notice on high gain tones there's a lot of hum in between stops. This prevents that. It completely cleans the signal, and this is the default setting. You don't have to do anything. So that's pretty rad. Next thing is a gate. If you are anything like me, to where you do a lot of rhythmic chugging, palm mutes and stuff like that, having a good gate will give you that really tight cutoff, making everything sound a little bit more uniform and a little bit more clean. And sometimes, in my case, more punchy. So that's pretty rad. The way I have mine set up is I have my threshold set at -40 and my input at +10. Reason being is I would like for this to actually be -50, but this doesn't give me that option, so I'm boosting the input 10 decibels as a way around that. -50 is a pretty good starting point for most gates if you want to have that tight rock sound. Next, I have my hold at 25 milliseconds. Reason being, if you hit a staccato, kind of like funky note to where it's like beep, beep, you don't want it to start immediately tailing off as soon as you get past that initial transient. You want it to kind of have a little bit of breathing room and then taper off. So that hold just saves me that effort. Next, the release. My release is set at 100. This is for my tight rhythm section, so my more rock stuff. If you want something more natural, you may want to push this up to around 300 milliseconds, which gives you 3 seconds before it starts, rolling off. Or 3 seconds until it's fully done rolling off. Sorry about that. Next in my chain, compressor. I use the DLM compressor. I usually use it on Hunky, Robusta, pretty much whatever. I just make sure I go in and I completely turn the output to 0. That saves me the effort of having my signal jump up or going into the amp sim head way too loud, giving me a really overblown sound. So, good compressor. What this is going to do is going to even out a lot of my strums, making it more consistent. And if you're playing rock, the last thing you want is like really pokey strums, chugs, or anything like that. Really useful during leads as well. If you're hitting like a really beautiful melodic part, you don't want certain notes to just be jumping out and stabbing you in the ear, while others disappear completely. Compressor helps with that. Next, a tube screamer. So the way I use a tube screamer is pretty much the way any metalhead would, because I predominantly play rock. So drive is all the way off, level is completely straight up, normal, stock, default, no volume change. The only thing I'm using is the tone knob. This tone knob is going to act like a high pass, and if you're using a really driven tone, like you're running into a overdriven head, you're going to notice the bass gets really fizzy and really kind of gross. By using this tone knob, you can tighten it up. It'll start rolling off the low end, giving you more focused of a tone, more clean, and kind of just sounds better, sounds beefier. It really accentuates the way you strum. The head I'm using, I've been loving this thing lately, the Fluff Amp Sim called Amped Roots. It's, I believe, a 6505. I'm using pretty much everything pretty normal. I have a little bit of a high boost and a little bit of a presence cut, but for this, I'll just level it out because it doesn't really matter. The volume is set at not normal because I had to balance it to my voice, so don't worry about that being a little bit low. And gain is just set to where it's right before breakup without the tube screamer. So that's pretty much the basics. The only thing different is these are my OwnHammer impulses. I have a Marshall on my left and a Mesa on my right. Reason being is, I'll show you in a second. So this is what it sounds like. Sorry for just talking the whole first part, but I had to explain the basis. This is what it sounds like in action. So you could already tell I'm a rhythm guitarist. I like those big, chunky rock power chords and bar chords. And that's predominantly where I get my sound. So let's go through. If I turn off my compressor and my tube screamer, this is what happens to the tone. It sounds okay, but it doesn't sound as focused as before. That tube screamer, it sounds okay, but it's just not as forward. So the tube screamer helps. Another thing is if you're going to be doing a lot of chugs, it gets really messy. Also, I apologize about my playing. I'm trying to do two things at once, but with that compressor, that compressor just makes everything more consistent. So now you can kind of understand why I choose the plugins I do. Noise suppression cleans it. Gate just makes it super nice and choppy, so versus, hear that noise? I don't need that. If I completely bypass noise suppression, and I don't even have a noisy guitar. I think my chord's starting to go, but no, it's actually from something. Yeah, no, it's the chord. I was correct, it's the chord. But as soon as I put the suppressor and the gate, beautifully clean. Perfect example, didn't mean for that to happen. So this is my overdrive tone. The only thing you need to know is the way I dial in my gain is I turn off my tube screamer and I put it right to the point of breakup. So right before you hear it start to overdrive, right there. See, around right here is where it starts really getting grindy. That sounds beautiful. I need it a little bit back from there. A little bit less. There we go. Perfect. The reason you do that is if you're going to be doing a double track or anything like that, that treble is exponential. So what you think is perfect, it's going to turn out being really fizzy and really kind of obnoxious in the mix. So, with the tube screamer, perfect. So that's my drive tone. Now, let's go through. I'm going to move the cab down to the bottom and bypass the head, leaving us with nothing interesting. As you can tell, my strings are kind of dead. So bear with me. I'm going to load up Emmissary. Emmissary is pretty fantastic. I'm going to choose a clean tone. And I'm going to turn up the bright switch. Reason being, my strings are dead, and it just sounds bad without it. Just for an example, this is how bad it sounds. Not the best. But with the bright switch flipped, totally different. Pretty basic. Now, how much gain do I want to use? Well, if you use low gain, it's going to come out brittle. Really nasally. It's okay. Or if you go real too heavy, it's going to sound really crunchy, which could be fine for a crunch tone, but for now, it's a clean tone. So that's totally fine for a clean tone for me right there. Now let's mess with the tubes. A 6L6 is going to give you a more full, more woofy sound. So if you play a low note, you'll notice that low note is the clearest thing there. It's pretty okay. However, an EL34 is going to give you more of a mid focus, which may sound better in context. More even. KT88s, they're going to be really treble focused and a little bit of high mids. So that's pretty perfect right there. I don't have any problem with that. If I were given this clean tone, well, let's play something different. I wouldn't be too upset by that. It's coming out more as a crunch, so I actually will back that off a little bit. Oh, also, I think I have my tube screamer on. Yeah, that's another thing. Yeah, so I can use this tube screamer now to dial it in. I'll lower the gain, or the level, to give me a little bit more of a cleaner sound. There we go. So that's probably quiet on video, so I'm gonna have to turn it up a little. So I'm not too upset by that. If I were building a clean tone, the first thing I would do is say, I need some ambience on this. Because nobody uses just a straight clean tone with nothing on it. That's a little weird. Unless you're like a jazz player, which I am not good enough to be. So I'm gonna go up, I'm gonna load a delay, which is gonna be Coco delay. Coco delay is amazing. I'm using my preset called 8th triplet. Feel free to copy these settings. It's just the starting point. I like using all triplets because if you're playing something on the grid, like quarter notes, all your delays are gonna fall on your next note. So if you played, they're all gonna play at the same time if you have more than one repeat. And that gets really messy and it sounds really bad. But if you are using a triplet, it's always gonna fall off beat. So that's gonna be super useful. See, that sounds great. That sounds so cool. The big thing is the drift knob. If you use the drift, you can choose how much warble you have. Meaning you could simulate something like a tape delay, pitch delay, just a bunch of different stuff. It's kind of cool. Especially if you're playing something like kind of skanky. I think that works out well. So that's pretty cool. Now let's give it a little bit of reverb. If you grabbed Little Plate from Sound Toys when it was free the other year, you're in luck because this thing's amazing. This is almost like a Fender reverb tank, so it can give you that really nice lush sounding guitar in the best way. So I'm gonna high pass this a little bit because those things were kind of small. This is what it sounds like completely wet. Already you can kind of tell it's got that reverb tank. You feel like you could just knock it on top and get that dum 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 kind of thing happening. That sounds amazing. If I just blend this in with my signal. So that's pretty cool. That's a pretty good clean tone for me. Now to remove all of this, is now we're going to move on to a crunch tone. I'm going to bypass the tube screamer. I'm going to go back to Emmissary. I'm going to flip this right here to the drive channel, turn off the gain, and now we'll start flipping through knobs. Alrighty, that's pretty crunchy. You can give a little bit more if you want, but that's gonna start pushing it towards the drive. So I'm gonna keep it all the way down. Pretty cool. If I wanna make it brighter, I can. That'll give you more of that punk sound. That British punk sound, it's kinda cool. A little bit too much for me right now. The deep knob. Not digging deep, it's a little too messy for me. Kind of takes away from it. On an overdrive, it would make sense, but on a crunch, not so much. Shape knob. I'm definitely feeling the shape knob. Pretty cool. We can flip back to the back right here, and we can mess with the tubes again. So let's try the 6L6. Already not feeling the 6L6. EL34, let's try that. Sorry about that. The EL34s are okay. Let's try the KT88s. I personally like the KT88s. They just sound a little bit better on this in this context. For anything where I want it to be bright and kind of clean, KT88s. If it needs to be burly, it needs to be metal, it needs to be rock, definitely not KT88s. That gets a little bit thin. So this works for me. The other thing that I didn't mention earlier when doing the clean tone, the presence knob will give you a lot more presence. So I'd play with that a little bit, figure out where it sounds good. I'm going to keep it normal. And this depth knob, it took me a second to figure out what it did. With it all the way, it gives you a lot more low-end focus. With it all the way to the left, it leaves it full, but a little bit less focus there. So for example, if I'm playing... You're mostly going to hear this note. If it's all the way to the other way, you're going to hear a lot more of these upper ones. So depending on what you're looking for, you may want to leave it flat. For now, flat is totally okay. That works for me. I could do all my tones with this and just the tube screamer, but that gets a little bit boring. So I'm going to go back to this, and I'm going to show you how I do my drive tone, because it's pretty basic. As you saw, pretty much straight, like everything at noon. Drive right to the point of breakup. That's it, because we started there. You already know what it is. Next, how do I do my lead tones? This is a little trick that I like, and this may be a little bit weird, but it works for me. So again, cocoa delay. A little 8th triplet preset. Set that up. And more feedback. Lower that to around here. That's probably fine. So that works for me. And that do. Love that kind of stuff. Love that. So that sounds cool. What happens if I make it a little bit more spacey by going to a 4th triplet? Sounds even bigger. Let's try a half note triplet. It's a bit much, so I'll stick here. So that sounds pretty cool. But how do I make it my lead? Well, let me show you a little trick. Pitch proof with a P. This thing is like a Digitech whammy, but free, and it's amazing, and I love it. So right now I have it set to a fifth harmony in the key of A major or F sharp minor. I don't know what key I'm in. I don't know notes on my guitar. I'm kind of a hack in that aspect. But check this out. I have a fifth harmony, a fifth or a 7, or a 6 or a 7, sorry. Just naturally. 7. Really, really cool. But that's not how I use it. I use a octave down. I had a solo for my song Riza, which not publicly out there, but it is out there. This song, it was killing me. I had a DI and I felt like my lead was just miles above everything. I thought, how do I fix this? Well, I copied the DI and I was like, what if I just move it down? And I pitched it down an octave. I was like, oh, that's cool, but it sounds not as clean, not as focused, not as tight. So I was like, well, I could always copy the DI, leave it normal, and then blend. And that's when I was like, maybe I just wanted more low frequencies in this lead tone. So I'm going to play the lead with this octave. I'm going to lower it down a little bit. There we go. Let's give this a test. There we go. So whenever I play that lead riff, and that's pretty sick to me. I could mess with the pitch, the detune amount, so if I want it a little bit sharp, a little bit flat. Can be really cool if you want it to sound doubled without actually doubling it. And I say doubled, but with the octave, you know what I mean. But so to me, that's sick. That combo of that delay and that octave, really cool. You could also do octave up, but if you know me, I don't like super high stuff. Like, I don't even play above the 12 very often. So this. It sounds cool, but it's not as heavy. It's not as girthy. So this is super cool. Another lick I have is I messed up pretty badly, but you get the idea. I think any kind of low octave sounds kind of cool. So you've seen how I do my clean, my crunch, my overdrive, and my lead. Anything past that, just experimentation. Another thing to note is the reason I like putting my reverbs before the impulse response is if you are using a reverb pedal, that reverb pedal isn't just putting your guitar in a space. It's putting your signal in a space, and then it's going through your speaker, which is coloring the sound. So it may be a perfectly tuned hall, but it's going through a not perfectly clean amp. So it's going to be colored in some way. So I like to emulate that. For example, do the same thing. If I put it here, you notice it has like it doesn't sound like a room, but as soon as I put it here, it sounds like an actual room. Just for example, I'm gonna play it with a little bit more of the original signal. Versus after. It sounds good, but this sounds scratchier and better to me. And it's got that ring to it that I really love in a guitar sound. It just sounds cool. So that's the way I like to do it. Anyways, that's pretty much all the tips and tricks I got. Sorry about this. There's a little delay in my ear, so it's speech jamming me. But yeah, that's how I go about building my guitar chains with almost all free plugins. Oh, I almost forgot one more thing. NadIR and Emmissary come together. NadIR comes with some stock impulses, which are really, really good. These are the stock. They're going to be a little bit scratchier than the own hammer, but just know it's free. So that works out pretty well. If you're looking for free, you can handle everything. Oh, I forgot another thing. Sorry about this. I've recorded this like 8 times. But the reason I use a Mesa Marshall combo is I like to adjust the center balance, and it just chooses how much of each goes through. This is perfectly balanced Mesa and Marshall. If I want more Marshall, I can get that classic rock sound. If I push it more towards Mesa, I can get more of that 90s to mid 2000s tone. It's giving me the best of both worlds, so I can go, oh, I want to have like a neutral tone. Oh, I want a little bit more modern. Oh, I want a little bit more retro. So that works out for me. That's the only other thing. There's the room knob, which if you want room sound. Kind of cool. The resonance knob chooses how much resonance to give you. Pretty straightforward. You get the idea. Anyways, sorry about all the rambling. Maybe a longer video. Hope it helps. Peace.